So how does a 130-year-old document about workers' rights, of all things, suddenly get twisted into this huge, divisive statement about what a real family is? Well, today, we're going to unpack exactly that. We're diving into the story of how it happened and, what it really tells us about the battle for the future of the Catholic Church. All right, let's jump right in. And here it is. This is the statement that kicked everything off. It comes from the new Pope, Leo XIV, and this one sentence, it just ignited a global firestorm. And he did it by weaving a very, very specific definition of family right into the middle of a historical quote.
So that leaves us with the big question, right? How in the world did a text on workers' rights get turned into a statement on the modern family? How was this even done? To really get the impact of these words, we've got to look at who said them and the stage he chose to say them on.
Okay, first off, the timing here was absolutely no accident. The source material points out that this statement was made before the Pope's official inauguration. He's giving a speech to Vatican diplomats, which is, a super high-profile stage. It was a move that was basically guaranteed to get maximum media attention right out of the gate.
All right, so to really get what all the fuss is about, we have to go back to the original document that was quoted. It's a papal encyclical from way back in 1891, and it's called Rerum Novarum.
So you got to picture the late 19th century. We're talking the peak of the Industrial Revolution. Society was just completely split. You had this massive, suffering working class dealing with unbelievable injustice. Think child labor, horrific working conditions, wages that barely kept people alive. Pope Leo XIII wrote Rerum Novarum, which, by the way, translates to of new things, as a direct answer to this crisis. The whole point was not to define what a family is, but to fight for the basic dignity of workers.
And for anyone who's not familiar, an encyclical is like one of the highest forms of papal teaching. It's basically a letter sent to the entire church. And this one, Rerum Novarum, it became a foundational text for what's known as Catholic social teaching. It was all about fair wages, the right to own property, and the government's job to protect the poor.
So just look at the key themes here on the screen. It's pretty clear, right? It's almost all about labor and economics. Now, yeah, the family is mentioned, you can see it there at the bottom, but the context was all about protecting the family from the government sticking its nose where it didn't belong, and from economic exploitation. It had nothing to do with defining who's in the family. And that point is absolutely crucial, so hang on to it.
Okay, so how exactly does a document about workers' rights get turned into this? Well, it all comes down to a really clever, and some would argue pretty deceptive bit of wordplay. Let's break down exactly what Pope Leo XIV did.
Okay, so here's the original passage from 1891. Pope Leo XIII is making a point that the family is a true society that existed long before any government, and because of that, it has its own rights that are totally independent of the state. The whole focus here is on the family's autonomy.
And this is where you can see the trick in plain sight. On the left, you've got the original. On the right, the new version. See what he did? Pope Leo XIV just drops in his own restrictive clause, which is based on the stable union between a man and a woman, right into the middle of the historical text, and then just keeps going with the original quote. He basically retrofitted a 130-year-old sentence with a very modern and very narrow definition.
Now, this source analysis we're looking at uses two really powerful German words to describe this. First, it calls it an imposition, oktroyiert. That's a word you'd use for a law that's just forced on people without their say. And second, it says this creates a bottleneck, a Flaschenhals, which, as you can imagine, severely chokes off the original, much broader meaning. It's like pouring something through a funnel. A whole wide world of meaning gets squeezed down into one tiny, restrictive opening.
But here's the thing. According to the source, this new interpretation isn't just a distortion of the past. It also completely ignores how the original text can actually be read in a much more inclusive way today.
So what this analysis suggests is that if you actually look at the core principles of Rerum Novarum, the real definition of a family isn't about biology. It's what they call a responsibility community. What does that mean? It means a family is defined by what it does, not who's in it. It's about mutual commitment, about taking care of kids, and about contributing to the greater good. And if you use those criteria, well, then any family structure that does those things, single-parent families, blended families, rainbow families, they would all fit right into the spirit of the original text.
So if we go back to that original quote one more time, the argument becomes pretty clear. The definition being used is functional, not structural, not biological. It's all about what a family does as a unit in society, not who makes up that unit. And this leads to a really powerful, kind of damning conclusion in the source material. By twisting the meaning this way, the new pope took Rerum Novarum, a document about new things, and turned it into what the source calls Rerum Regressus, a document about regressive things. It's a total 180-degree reversal of the original intent.
So why is this such a big deal? I mean, why does this one quote matter so much? Well, the source breaks down the fallout with a really comprehensive three-part critique of the Pope's statement and its consequences.
Okay, so the critique hits from three different angles. First, there's the theological argument. The source says the statement just flat out contradicts the gospel's universal message of inclusion. Then there's the pastoral side. It's seen as incredibly hurtful to LGBTQIA+ people. The source has this really striking phrase for it: identity politics with the censor. That's a powerful image, right? It suggests the Pope is using sacred symbols to push a narrow, divisive agenda. And finally, there's the political angle. It's seen as a slap in the face to reform movements inside the church, and it's pretty undiplomatic to all the countries that now legally protect diverse families.
And of course, the reaction from outside the Vatican was swift. You have this quote from Francis de Bernardo of New Ways Ministry. That's a Catholic advocacy group that's been fighting for LGBTQIA+ inclusion for decades. He really summed up how a lot of people felt. Pope Francis started opening doors, and this just feels like a huge step backward, like the new pope is refusing to walk through the very door his predecessor opened.
So at the end of the day, we're left with this one massive question. Was this a calculated, strategic move to draw a conservative line in the sand right at the start of a new papacy? Or was it a huge and deeply damaging pastoral mistake? That's really the question at the heart of this whole debate, and it's one that will probably help shape the future of the Catholic Church for a long, long time.